Hello, and welcome to the Bettendorf Public Library's Take-Home Workshop. Today, we're going to be making these adorable hand-sewn felt bunnies. They're very cute, and you will receive in your kit the supplies and a pattern to make not only one this size, but also a smaller one, which would be adorable. But we're going to do the big one today just because the larger size makes it easier for the camera to see what's happening. So let's get going on this adorable little guy and let's see what's in our kit. First in the kit, you're gonna find your template. So as you can see, there's the pattern for the large and the small. And you'll see up here, it says Creative Bug. Creative Bug is a service that the Bettendorf Library subscribes to that has thousands of craft and art classes and projects and daily inspirations. It is a treasure trove of information for crafters. And today's craft we got from our subscription to Creative Bug. So if you have a Bettendorf Library card, you have access to that at home. Otherwise, you can come into the library and use it from one of our workstations here in the library. So you have your patterns. You're going to have a needle. In your kit, that's going to be in a little piece of plastic straw so that you don't get poked unnecessarily because it's a sharp one today. You're going to have your thread. We have brown and we have white, and we are just using embroidery floss for these, and we will separate these into individual strands to use those. You're going to have two pieces of felt, a white and a kind of a yellow one. You're going to have some batting to stuff our bunny with, and then we're also going to have some beans that we're going to use to weight down the bottom of our bunny. What we're asking you to supply is scissors. Now in this project, you're going to be cutting both paper and fabric. So if you have separate scissors at your house for that, you'll need them both. If you have a set pair of scissors that you like to use for fabric, I would not recommend using them on paper. Paper dulls scissors really quickly. So I like to have one pair for paper and other things, and then another pair that I keep if I really want to keep them nice and sharp all the time. So those are my fabric scissors. And then you're also going to need, you could need a pencil or a marking tool. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute. The first step is to cut out our pattern, and we're going to be doing the larger bunny today to make it easier to see on camera. So I'm just going to use my paper scissors and I'm going to cut out our bunny pattern. Once you have your patterns cut out, then we will trace them. And we're going to need one of this kind of bowling pin shaped on the white for the round one for the bunny base, and two of these on our yellow. So you have a couple options for cutting these. One, you can just hold it and cut around it, hold these together and cut around it. You could pin it. I'm going to use a pencil to trace around it lightly. You don't want to use something like a permanent marker, because these marks will show in your finished product. But if I use a pencil like this, it'll give me just a light enough mark that I can see it to cut, but I'll be able to get it off afterwards. If there are any parts where that pencil mark shows, I'll be able to use an eraser or just give it a little rub and be able to do that. So we're going to need two of these, and then we're going to do the same with the bunny base and this long thin piece. We're going to do those on the white, one of each of those. For this, I'm going to use, again, my fabric scissors. They're a lot sharper, they're much better scissors. Now that we have all our pieces cut, we're going to put the features on the bunny. So we're going to start by putting the eyes on. They're indicated on the pattern, And you have a couple ways you can position these. One, you could just eyeball it. It comes down from the corner of the ear and across your nose. I'm gonna actually take my pencil and poke through the paper there. And I'm just gonna line my paper back up and put a mark through there. So I have a little mark right there. Now I want those two sides of my bunnies facing each other. And then I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. So now I know exactly where my eyes are going to go. For the eyes, we're going to be using this brown thread, and we're going to be separating out 2 strands. Since this is embroidery floss, it's 6-ply embroidery floss. 6 strands make up 1 full strand of floss. And we're just gonna be using 2 of them. So we're gonna take 2, hold it gently here, and then just pull it right out. So we're just gonna be using 2 strands at a time. So I'm gonna thread my needle and we'll go ahead and do the eyes. I've threaded my needle and I'm going to tie a knot at the end of the thread. I just wrap it around like this and then I roll it off my finger and pull it tight. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do just a running stitch in a little circle around here, just to define the edges of the eye. So this is where the dot is, will be the inside of our bunny. So we're gonna come up from behind so that our knot will stop our thread from coming all the way through. I'm gonna flip this over. We're gonna come up from behind. And then I'm just going to do a little running stitch where we're gonna go down. We're gonna come up a little bit away from that. And then go back down where I went down before. And we're gonna do this in a circle. You want to try and go down right where your previous stitch went down so that your stitches are connected to each other. And you're going to end up right back where you started. Now we're going to use the satin stitch to fill in that hole. And a satin stitch is just a stitch that runs from one side here to the other. Then you're going to come up right next to it and go back. And so it's just one stitch next to the next stitch, next to the next stitch. You're going to start with pretty short ones on the edge and make them longer as you go across, and then go back down to small again. And you're just going to fill this space in. And you want full coverage, so your stitches are going to be right next to each other. It's not hard, it's just very detailed. I went right down through my knot there, didn't want to go through. Let's try again, there we go. Once you have your eye done, then you'll go ahead and you'll do the same thing with your other one. And again, you're going to be working with the dot on the back so that when you're done, you'll have two facing bunnies. Forgot to mention, after finishing the eyeball in the first half, is that when you're done, you're going to want to knot it on the back. So you'll just make a loop, pass your needle through, and you want your knots to be as close down to the fabric as possible. So I pull it tight, put my fingernail on it, and just pull it. Just like when you're putting a bow on a present. You need somebody's finger on there. And I usually do it twice just to be safe. And then we snip that tail. And we have two bunnies with eyes in pretty much the same spot. Now, we're gonna do the same thing on this piece. Let's zoom out a little bit so you can see better. And it's going to go, it's just an X. And that's the nose, kind of like the nose and the whiskers of your bunny. And so again, we're gonna use the brown thread, 2 strands. We're gonna knot it, just go up, down, and you're done with that. So I put a knot in the end, and then for this one, I'm just gonna eyeball. It just basically goes in the middle here, right at this kind of narrowest point. So we're just gonna go up and down. And you don't wanna get too close to the edges because it will get, it might get lost a little bit in your stitching then. So we're gonna keep that towards the center, up, down, just like that. Just one little X. And then again, we're gonna knot it on the back. We're gonna do 2 knots right up tight against the fabric. Snip it, and that piece is done. Now we can start assembling our bunny. We're gonna use the white thread to assemble our bunny. Now I gave you about a 4-foot piece. I would cut that in half so that you're working with not more than about a 2-foot piece, and then you're gonna wanna separate out 2 strands. If you try and separate out the 2 strands from that big long 4-foot piece, it's going to get all tangled and knotted. So cut it in half first and then separate your pieces. We're going to be using a blanket stitch. So we're going to be working with the outsides of our piece facing out. And we're gonna line them up so we have one bunny piece, one yellow bunny piece, and then we have that white kind of bowling pin looking piece. We're gonna start at the base down here. And what we're gonna do, I have not knotted my thread at the end in this case. And I'm gonna show you why. We're going to basically knot it as we stitch. So we're going to come up between the layers, come out through the yellow, we're gonna leave a tail, go around and go through the white and back out through the yellow. And we're gonna take our needle and go through that loop and pull it tight. And that is what's going to anchor this. And we're going to do it exactly the same in as close to the same spot as possible. So we're gonna go from the white to the yellow, and through that loop again. This end will eventually get tucked up inside the bunny, so you don't have to worry about that. Now we're gonna start on our blanket stitch. So I'm gonna turn this over so I can see the white side. We are going to go from the white side to the yellow side. And you'll see that little loop right there. We're gonna come back through that loop. I see it better on this side. And if you prefer to work from the yellow to the white, you can. So we have little loops coming up, and then you'll see a line of stitches as we go. So again, from the white back through the yellow, till there's a little loop. Then we're going to go through that loop and pull it up. We're going to keep going like that right up to the base of the paw there. You want to try and keep your stitches as evenly spaced as possible. Just makes for a nice, neat look. And you'll know you're doing it right if you see, let's see if I can get this centered right. There's a line of white stitches that run right up along the edge of your seam. And you'll see a little bit of the stitch that goes in on either side, and then the line of white along there. We're going to do one that ends right at the base of the paw. Go through that loop. Now we got to be a little bit tricky here, because what we're going to do is we're going to go through the white and into the yellow, and we're going to come up. We're still going to be along the edge of the white. Then we're going to go back through the yellow, right close as possible to where we came through. And we're still going to pick up that loop. So through the white, back through the yellow, and pick up the loop. Through the white. What I find helps sometimes is if I stick my thumb up here and grab that thread, it keeps me from pulling the thread too tight. Make sure I have a loop left that I can pick up when I come back. So I'm going to go back through the yellow at the same point. And pick up my loop. You're going to keep going along those lines through till you get to the top of the bunny's paw. So I have like one more. See, I had a little loop behind my eye before, and that's okay if the back of your eyes, for example, are messy, because that's just gonna go inside my bunny. Nobody will know. Don't tell anybody, it's a secret. So once we get to the top of our bunny paw, now we're going to start going back to our regular blanket stitch. And here it's gonna take a little manipulation. You're going to have to move things around a little bit because you want your edges to match up. Through white to yellow, pick up my loop, pull it tight, bend that a little bit, and do the same. Back to white to yellow, and pick up the loop. Oopsie, I got my ear caught in there. Pick up the loop. Now this is where you can see why you didn't want to get too close to the edge with your nose, because otherwise it would have gotten caught up in these stitches. You might also find in these curvier parts that it's easier to make your stitches a little smaller. So if, as I did in this particular case, perhaps my stitches should have been a little smaller when I started, but I'm just adjusting them now. So my stitches are not all going to be perfectly even, but around a curve, it does make it a little bit easier. So we're just going to keep going like that, right up until we get to the base of the ear. Okay, when we get to the base of the ear, we're going to want to do the same thing we did with the paw, where we're going to keep going with the white, but the ear is going to stick up. So it's kind of a modified blanket stitch. So we go through from the white to the yellow. Keep our finger in the loop there so we don't lose our loop. And then back at the same point. And I actually just ran right through the threads, which was not what I wanted to do. Okay, so I accidentally came back up right through my threads and it's going to create a knot. So I'm just going to unthread my needle, pull that out to undo my last stitch, and then rethread my needle and pick up again so that I don't have a big knot right in the middle of a bunny. Okay, so we're back on track. I just unthreaded the needle, undid a stitch, and rethreaded the needle. So we're gonna try that again. Go in from the white through the yellow. Make sure you keep your loop there. Come back at as close to the same spot as you can get without actually going through your thread. And then through the loop. And we want to do this in such a way that our white piece goes across the base of the ear. So we're going to be bending that and curling that around. And I just stabbed myself in the finger. You've probably noticed these are sharp needles, so you're going to want to be careful. When you get around to the point where you're at the base of the back of the ear and you're starting to head down his back, then you're going to want to go back to regular blanket stitch again. And again, we're just manipulating that, we're just curving it around. So when we're just about a stitch shy of that, we're going to unthread our needle and we're just going to let this one hang for a little bit. And you'll see you have part of your bunny done. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to do basically the same thing with our other piece. We are going to start down here at the base again, same way we did before. Bringing our thread up from the center and doing our blanket stitch all the way up till we get around to the back side there. Once we've gone around the base of the ear, then we're going to pick up with the regular blanket stitch again. And this time we're going to take it right on down to the point, the tip of the white. And we're just going to keep going here. And we still have this tail left from the other piece. We're going to just tuck that out of the way for now. And once we've done our stitch right down to the tip, we're going to take these two threads from either side and we're going to knot them together. And I'm going to unthread my needle for that. Makes it a little bit easier. I don't have to worry about stabbing myself, which I do all the time. And by taking these two together, it just makes your point really nice and tight and pointy. We're going to bring these and pull them through to the back. Now one of these I'm going to take and mine are about the same length. If yours aren't though, I'm going to trim off one of them shorter. But I'm going to keep stitching with this other one. And we're going to continue, we're going to tuck our short end inside there, and we're going to continue with the other thread, and we're going to continue with our blanket stitch right down his back and around his little tail there. So we're continuing with our blanket stitch right on down to the end of his tail, and we're going to be making little adjustments here and there to make sure that our stitches end up in such a way that our tails match together. So we might need to do a little bit of adjustment here and there. So I'm right down to the bottom and I have a little bit of thread left. I'm just going to knot that off. And this time I'm actually going to do a knot, and I'm going to do it so that it is nice and snug and if possible inside the seam there. So probably should have left myself a little bit more tail to make this easier, but it should be okay. I'm just gonna pull that in and do it. And again, I'm going to do it twice, each time pulling the knot as close down to the fabric as I possibly can. Yeah, I would recommend that you stop, and if you start running low on thread, stop and make your knots before you get down to this little bit of a tail, because it makes it just a lot trickier to get a good knot right up against the fabric. And then I'm going to trim that off. Once we've knotted that off, we have most of our bunny done. His little ears sticking up, his eyes and his nose. And now we're going to do his base. And the base is just a circle. And it doesn't seem like that would work because the bottom of the bunny is a triangle right now, but we're going to manipulate it, and I assure you it does. So I've rethreaded my needle again with 2 strands of the white. I've knotted it. And I'm going to start stitching here at the base of the tail. And I'm going to bring it up from the inside, and I'm going to bring it through in such a way that it catches the last loop of thread there that stitched the tail. And that way it'll just help reinforce that connection. But we're going to do the same thing. We're going to put these together. If you have any little ends or anything like that, we're going to tuck those down inside. I'm going to do the same thing, blanket stitch, all the way around, front to back, and then come back and catch that loop and pull it tight. We're just going to keep going around. And again, since you're matching what was basically a triangle to a circle, you're going to have to adjust it as you go. But it will fit, it'll work just fine. The other thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make your stitches perhaps a little bit on the smaller side, not real big, because again, you're going around a curve and the smaller stitches make for a slightly smoother curve. So we're going to keep going like this, and we're going to go around not all the way. We're going to go around a little over 2/3 because we need to leave a hole to stuff our bunny. So we've stitched most of the way around the bunny, but we still have left a little hole there. I'm going to take my needle and I'm just going to tuck it up here so I don't lose it. And now we're going to stuff it through that little hole. So we're going to take our polyfill and just pull out little pieces like this and get them in there. You just stuff them in. And how much stuffing you use is entirely up to you. If you want a very, very well-packed bunny, then you would use more. If you want something a little softer, a little squishier, then you use less. It's just that simple. So we're going to take our fingers and we're just going to get them up there. And you want to make sure you get it up into his head, all the way up. It takes generally a little bit more stuffing than you would usually expect, I find. Get it in there. And just keep poking. If you're ever stuffing something that is bigger than this, or if you decide you want to make a really big bunny and blow up that pattern and make a life-size bunny, you can always use something like a pencil to get it up there and get it up into all those corners and creases up top. So once he's stuffed the way we like him, oh, look how cute he is. I'm gonna put a little space, just a little bit more stuffing down here at the bottom, and then we're gonna put beans in the bottoms. And the beans, they're not, you don't have to do it, but what they're gonna do is they're going to give you weight down at the bottom to help your bunny stand up. So we're going to take our beans and we're just gonna pour them in. Poke them down. Just about any kind of dried bean would work for this. In the original Creative Bug tutorial, they suggested like a bigger bean, like a kidney bean. But we work with what we could get, and I wasn't able to get kidneys, so we got pintos instead. That's what we're working with. So fit as many of those in as I can. And then I'm gonna take my needle and I'm just gonna keep going, and I'm gonna keep stitching, and those beans will stay in. And again, another reason why you would want a slightly smaller stitch around the base depends on the size of your beans. You don't want your beans coming out those holes. And here we are back at the base of the tail. So again, I'm going to bring it up, and I'm going to bring the needle up far enough that it catches a previous thread, just to give it a little extra security. And I'm going to wrap it around one more time. Bring it up from the inside. And then I'm going to tie my knot. And again, I'm going to snug that knot down there just as tightly as I can and get it in with as close to the fabric as I possibly can. Trim off the extra. And look at this little guy. He stands up. Oh my gosh, these are so cute. Now imagine this guy with another little one or two or three or five right next to him. What a cute display that would make. So there you have your hand-sewn felt bunny. Just a few stitches, a little patience, some stuffing, and you have an adorable little bunny to put on display in your house. I hope you enjoyed our take-home workshop today. We'd love it if you shared your work with us on social media. And our thanks to the Friends of the Bettendorf Public Library, as always, for sponsoring our workshops.